The vast majority of CEOs don't have a marketing education. What is the education and experience level of the person who's expected to lead their marketing? Is there even an understanding of how critical marketing is for the growth and success of the business? To lead as a CEO, you need to know what the recipe is.
The big idea there is that if you're the CEO or the leader of the organization, you don't have to become the marketing genius, but you need someone that is. Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where leaders share their tools and practical advice to make you a better leader today. My name is Max Kozlowski. I will be your host. And today we have Lara August in our show. I want to talk about Lara, where I first met her, what she does, how she helps people, because I think it's a wonderful story. So it's a slightly different introduction, but we have been, worked together and seen each other a few times. And I want to just share how, first of all, Laura's a caring individual, helping businesses all around. She is the founder and CEO of Robot Creative. It's a complete advertising and marketing agency, from strategy to execution and everything in between, which you don't see that often. And it's really unique and it's really powerful, and they accomplish some really great outcomes. She's a very active board member, advisor. I like to joke with her that I see her everywhere that I go. She's always there. She's typically a judge or supporting a team or working in the community in some way. She more officially also works with startups through Techstars. So for all my entrepreneurs and startups out there, you probably already know who Techstars is and what they do. And she also works with small businesses and startups through Trinity University and their VMS program. I could go on, but it's about you, Lara. So thank you for being here today. It's awesome to have you.
Thank you. I don't even know what to do with that introduction.
Well,
thank you.
Just share with us some of your brilliance as we go. So before we get started, Lara, what's something good, fun, happy, positive that's been happening in your world?
So last year we celebrated our 25th year in business, which is kind of insane because I don't feel that old. It's a huge milestone, and it was also our biggest growth year ever. We grew by 50%, which we felt that, that was a lot of growth to have in one year, but it was amazing. So we just finished out a milestone year with record-breaking growth, and I'm kind of on a cloud right now because we have an incredible team and we're just really excited about the year ahead.
That is excellent. So I understand how important business is for you and in the community. So you succeeding in that is no surprise either, right? So let's jump a little bit into leadership. I have a lot of things that I want to talk to you about, but I always like to ask, when did you first learn about like the concept of or idea of leadership and what it is or what it's about?
Sure. I started my business when I was so young. I was 22 years old. And I think I became a leader before I fully understood the gravity of what any of that means, for sure, right? I had to lead a company. I had to lead employees. I then, very in short order, started joining boards and participating in more community efforts. And it took me a while to see great leaders in action, to learn from them, to get tools and resources passed down that, were more helpful. So I think I became a leader before I knew what one was. And I think that my definition of leadership has evolved from the very beginning, right? It's a huge, important title to call yourself a leader. It's such a critical role. And, the older I get, the more experience I have, the more I see in the world, the more people that I meet, and especially the more outstanding leaders that I meet, the more I see all of the different nuanced aspects to what it means to be a leader. So it's definitely an ever evolving endeavor, to understand leadership and to be better at it.
So you said something really cool. You said that what you thought about leadership at first and how you see it now has evolved, and it continues to evolve. So do you have some examples of what leadership was to you kind of when you were, a young rock star, and how has evolved now that, you're conducting a symphony?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm hardly conducting the symphony, but it was get stuff done. It was leadership early on was very much a process of, here's the business goal and what are we going to do to get it done? And a very straightforward nuts and bolts. I probably didn't understand the human aspects of it yet, being young, right? Like I didn't have a family yet. I didn't understand, I didn't understand all of the things that could go on in life that have a profound impact on people. I didn't understand my own career goals, probably, let alone the career goals of the people that I was leading. So the whole concept of mentorship, that started for me very early because I had a lot of mentors, and they kept me in business as a 22-year-old, starting a business. I think that I had incredible people that supported me. And so a lot of what I think of leadership probably came from them in the form of advice about how to not screw things up.
Yes, screwing things up, right? That's how we learn. So it's very typical, right? You're young, you're ambitious, you can see things, and you work really hard to get things done, and you're pushing people around you to join you in this and to get things done. And then things don't work out as well as you expected, because you would expect everyone to work as hard as you did and just push as hard and be as resourceful as you are and solve things. And then you're like, uh-oh, not everybody's like me. So tell me, I mean, do you have a story or two about how things kind of didn't go as planned because of that mindset, and then how you had to evolve it?
Well, definitely, I think emotional intelligence is a word that, probably didn't exist in 1998 when I started my business. It's a fairly, more recent concept, but I don't know when it was coined, but I became aware of it much more recently, maybe in the last 10 years or so. I had to get to know myself, and I had to understand deeply what makes me tick. And I am a creative person. I am the type of person that will sit in a different chair in the room every single time just to experience it. I will change everything on a dime to make it better, to evolve things. Like, to me, change is good, and rapid change is exciting, and it's not scary. And obviously, it took me a while to learn that in business, having stability, predictability, clear expectations, very solid expectation communications is important. And many people, I work with a whole blend of people. Some people are fine with change, but many of them are hired because they can be regular and consistent and dependable. And so they don't necessarily love my change, love, and attitude. So I had to get to know myself. I had to know what makes me tick. And I had to understand more. So a lot of personality tests. We've done strength finders and DISC and culture index. And so I'm a big fan of the personality assessments to understand yourself, to understand your team, to understand how you're engaging. And I don't know if I had taken Strength Finder 25 years ago, if it would have come out the same, but my top strength right now is individualization. And I think that's part of this process, is learning to understand that what makes every person tick is very personal. And the business has its own KPIs and goals, and we need to hit those. But how you're going to get there requires really understanding all of the nuances of the teams and the interactions, and how you're going to communicate with one another. So that's a lot. I should probably pause for a minute.
No, that's amazing. I'm actually going to ask you to continue. So it reminds me of the idea that managers play checkers and leaders play chess, understanding your pieces, the value of them, the value in their position where they are, and that's kind of what you're referring to. And I'm curious about, like, how did you become aware of the need for that, and then getting a little bit more into how you actually do it. You're giving us some great ideas on using personality profiling tests. You've mentioned a few. So I'd like to get a little bit into that as well.
Sure. Well, I mean, you kind of asked for a time where something didn't go well. I've had employees, to just tie back into what we were referencing before. I've had employees who felt like I was changing on a dime, somebody that worked with me for a decade, somebody that I'm still, feel very strongly about, great person who was a rock, was my stability. I think I had an intuitive sense that I needed people who would provide that regularity and stability so that I could, be the more creative one. But probably one of my earlier hires that worked for me for a very long time felt like the exact word he used was whiplash, that changing so frequently that it was impossible to keep up. And I had this feeling that, gosh, this person isn't doing all of the things, isn't catching up, isn't getting where we need to go. So there was this tension that in some cases could be healthy, like, hey, Lara, you need to calm down. You need to slow the pace of change for the entire team, not just for that individual. But really, what I learned also is that I need somebody as a second in command who can provide that stability, but that who also is going to understand that the change is my superpower, right? That's going to help me filter and work with it and channel the proper energy. Don't communicate everything to the team all at once, all the time. Filtering, I think, is probably the best way to put it. I'm going to continue having all the ideas that I have and thinking about all the change and having the vision, but when and how to tackle, whatever those ideas are, needs to be deliberate and thought out and slowly, communicated to the team. So there's one specific instance, but it's not just that person. I mean, it obviously that affected people around me, and I became aware of it. I'm not tone deaf. I'm very receptive to feedback. So as soon as I started hearing it, I started looking for resources and asking my mentors, how do I do this? What's the right approach? And so I think one of the best things that I found for dealing with that, my own personality trait, is EOS, because they talk about having a visionary and an integrator. And I read that book and I was like, oh, this is what I've needed, right? I need permission to be me. I need permission to have all of these ideas. And I need somebody who can make some sense of it and communicate it to the team, or help me communicate it to the team in a more orderly manner. So, with regard to that one, personality trait, and I think it's very typical of entrepreneurs. That's why this whole book was written. So I don't think I'm anything special or different or crazy, just that's a personality trait that kind of comes with the territory. And I think that they've provided a really good roadmap for finding that balance within your business by having team members with complementary traits, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I love about that is to help us really recognize that we need to work to our strengths, right? Mm-hmm. We need to enable ourselves and give ourselves permission, and then surround ourselves with the people that can help bring some balance and as you call it, right, like stability, and understand that it's okay to be different, and that we have to learn to work together. That there's going to be tensions.
Yeah. And some of those are healthy, right? Some of that is a healthy tension that you want. And I think that it's kind of like, I mean, in our business anyway, the healthy tension between the account managers representing the clients and the project manager who's representing the business. They shouldn't always be on the same page. There should be a healthy, very useful tension there. And so I think finding that from a leadership perspective is really important as well. Understanding your leadership style, or your own personality traits are going to play into your leadership style. So it's probably understanding yourself first, and then how are you going to channel that energy and use it in a positive way instead of a destructive way.
Right. So there you have it, guys, right? It's about understanding yourself first and what your strengths are, and how to then leverage your strengths to help level out, balance your weaknesses, and having the people around you that can help you with that. I want to talk about something. It's a little bit leadership, but it's definitely a lot startup. I've experienced this myself. I've seen it myself, but I'm curious about your thoughts. And the idea is that when you're a startup and you're moving fast, you need a lot of sameness on the team. But as you grow, then you start to need different personalities and different people, right? That when you have a bunch of people that are similar, right? Like a bunch of hard working, pushing forward type people, that's what like a startup needs. But then if you only have that, you're going to get derailed, right? Like you're going to go off a cliff. So what have you seen in your work with startups, and is that true or not?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but in general, I've seen it in almost every case. As the startups really start to hit that growth trajectory, and then as they start to round the curve and need to deliver regular, repeatable performance, right? It's one thing to just kind of get the boat moving. Once the boat starts moving, especially, from an investor perspective, from a KPI perspective, everybody wants to see that like hockey stick growth where, every month the performance increases, and, there's a little bit of peak and valley that's allowed, but you really need to see upward momentum when you're looking for investors. And so when we talk about startups, that's kind of what the climate, if it's an investment potential startup, looking for that growth is really important. And delivering that on a steady, repeatable basis requires a different personality type. You need the drivers, but you also need the people who can keep an eye on it, who can keep track of it, who can write down the results every month. Like, the people who are the drivers may not even be good at just writing something down every single month, right? Like it's those are those two opposing personalities. So I've definitely seen the same thing with my experience, which happened over a much longer time period. In the startup world with investors, it's much more compressed. I've definitely seen those early CEOs get very frustrated with a lot of their teammates early on because they may not feel that they can keep up, that they can drive in the same way. And so I think for startups, one of the key things is just understanding that you're going to need all personality types. You're going to need to learn to hire and recruit for them. You're going to need to learn to manage to that. And you can't manage everyone exactly the same. And looking at the personality types that are needed for the specific roles is really important. So if you can drill it down to the role within the business and what the expectations are, then you can create understanding among your team. Having conversations among your team, doing the personality assessments, having coaches come in and talk about interpersonal skills is really important so that the team members don't get frustrated with one another, but so that they appreciate the reason that each of the people are in the seat on the bus that they are.
Great. And that just repeats this idea that there's going to be tensions, and you don't want to avoid the tensions. You want to be able to manage the tensions, right? Sometimes I hear people think that everything should be smooth and there shouldn't be any tension, controversy, disagreements. But in fact, when there aren't any, that's when I get the most worried.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned like drivers, right? You need drivers in your startup, you need drivers in a young company, but at some point, you also have to have the systemizers, the people that make it repeatable and consistent. While the driver is, going nuts with creativity, innovation, change, testing things, the systemizers are trying to make sense out of it all and say, hey, how do we do this in a way that can be repeated? So I'm sure that getting the timing right for that is critical, and probably not that easy to like pinpoint to say, oh, okay, now we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think having somebody on board early on who, it depends. If we're talking again like investment worthy startups, then they sometime after that first shortly before or after that first round of funding, there needs to be somebody whose job it is to regularly manage those numbers, report to investors, understand the key KPIs, to be looking for what's working and what's not working, capturing what is working, documenting it to ensure that it happens on a repeatable basis. So it has to be pretty early on, just past initial funding, and I'm talking like early angel funding, not beyond that. You really need to have at least one person who has that personality trait and mindset.
I appreciate that, because many times we kind of think that things are like what we see on TV, right?
Mm.
And you see entrepreneurs and you see a bunch of people sitting behind a computer programming software, right? Writing code, and they're all techies. It's like, great, but I mean, maybe that's how you build a product, but that's not how you run a company. So it's important to have the mindset from the very beginning that there's going to be stages, and that you're going to be moving through those stages very quickly as a startup, especially when, as you call it, a fund-worthy company.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me shift gears here a little bit. And I'm pulling a little bit of my own personal experience here. So I've worked with advertising agencies of all shapes and sizes over my career. I mean, I've worked with the Saatchi and Saatchi, Leo Burnett, Gray, and those big guys, but I've also worked with a guy in a Mac, right? And there's this one trait that I believe is what makes or breaks these companies. And that is how well they lead their clients, how well they're able to, some people call it managing, but I really like the word leading a little bit better. Managing is one thing, but leading it, and I think it's a particularly difficult thing to do, because you're many times working with people that don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. They don't know what's best for them. And they have a very abstract idea of the outcomes that they want. So if you've been around for so long and you're growing at this pace, you must have figured something out. So what can we learn from what you've learned on that front?
Yes. So this is the advice for ad agencies section. So I think we have this part figured out. And it is one of the most important things as an agency to take clients who may be coming from a background that is very black and white or concrete, and to sell them concepts and visions and ideas before you've got them fully finished. So you've got to sell them on the price. You've got to convince them that you're capable of producing the thing. And you can show case studies and past work and give testimonials. But I think that the process that you use and the experience needs to be fun and collaborative and enjoyable. And I do think that the way we guide clients through that creative process is a little bit different. It's a little bit old school in some ways. Core values are also important, and we should probably come back to that, but we live and breathe our core values, and collaboration is one of them. So we are collaborative both internally and with our clients. And that's a word that lots of people use, but we live it. We actually share more stages of the process, I believe, than a typical agency with our clients. So a lot of agencies, I think, will have a kickoff meeting. They'll create a creative brief. They'll go back and work on something, and they'll present their ideas to the client. Almost every project has some research component where we will gather information and do something that resembles a typical creative brief, but it has a lot more questioning and diving deep to understand the business. Then we'll go back and do research, and we'll present that research to the client. And we always require key stakeholders to be in that meeting. So let's use branding as an example. We do all kinds of projects, but in the branding process, we actually share lots of examples of competitors' branding, role models' branding, and sharing that may not be unusual, but I think it is becoming more and more unusual in the design process to kind of share, usually that would be like back of the house research that the client never sees, but we want to share it with them. And during that meeting where we review the research, we're talking about what we like and don't like in the research that we're seeing, what trends we're seeing. We allow them to express their thoughts and feelings about it. And, they get a chance to tell us what they've seen, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And we get to share our expertise. And sometimes that's course correcting and educating. Sometimes it's giving them a visual vocabulary that they didn't have coming into the meeting. So it's an educational process. It's a get to know you process. It's a finding a common language process. And then we actually show them hand-drawn sketches for logos and for branding, which is very unusual. Most designers just go straight into the computer, and we tend to show these sketches. And it's a much more iterative process where we can show lots of different versions of concepts instead of just 3 finished logos. And I love doing that. It's getting harder and harder to find designers who are able and willing to do that, because many of them don't even do hand sketches anymore. But it's bringing the client on board on this journey. And I think that another thing that is a core tenet of what I train all new employees on is that this profound respect for the clients, profound respect for our internal team as well. If the client is putting their finger on something and they're not okay with it, they may not have the right answers. They may say, make it blue or make it bigger. This is a point of tension with a lot of agency client relationships, is that, wow, this isn't exactly what I was thinking. Well, then you didn't have enough of a conversation ahead of time to understand what they were thinking. If they had a concrete idea, if they didn't have a concrete idea, then they're telling you that they're not liking what they're seeing. If they're not liking what they're seeing, I know some designers that philosophically believe it's their job to convince them. Well, I need to make my point, and that's my skill set that I need, is to make my point. I believe quite the opposite, that the skill set of the designer needs to be a listener. And there's never any one solution to anything that we're doing. There's, I believe in all the shades of gray. So find some form of compromise. That doesn't mean compromising your artistic integrity, but, I always say, like, show them what they're asking for, and then maybe the other options that you believe to be the better choices. I'm getting really into the weeds. There's a lot of different ways to work with clients, but I think that communication throughout that process is so critical. Getting to know the client, building a strong relationship, showing them the respect that you have for them, taking the time to educate them so that you're on this journey together and both come out at the end excited about the outcome and no one's having to compromise. I think that's the goal. there's a lot of communication stages there that take some practice.
I can see how passionate you are about it and how hard you've worked on it, because it doesn't happen by accident, right? Like it doesn't happen by accident where you get to figure these things out. So you said, hey, here's some advice for advertising agencies, but the reality is that this works for everyone. One of the things
That's
that has been very valuable for my clients is when I've been able to bring in knowledge or insight or what people are doing in different industries and just kind of, cross-pollinizing it. And this is a great example because everything that you're saying are some things that I teach clients that are not in the industry. And I want to point these out because, first of all, because I connect so strongly and I preach a couple of these all the time. And second, because I think it's really important for people to really home in on these. So the first thing you said is fun. I believe that fun is the next big thing in the world, right? So it used to be, I mean, not too long ago, it was about making it easy. Now things need to be easy, but you also have to have fun in what you're doing. Enjoyable, right? Making the process enjoyable. It doesn't matter what process it is, whether you're selling them a shirt or a house or a remodeling, right? The process needs to be enjoyable for them. So I love that you mentioned that. And collaborative. I really believe that this is critical. And, like, again, my experience with creatives is they're very emotional about their work, right? They kind of associate it with their identity, who they are. So if you criticize their work, it's like criticizing them. So it gets a little finicky. But really understanding that it's a collaboration, and it's getting people engaged, invested in what you're doing in the process. And I love that you're
we
showing
actually
behind the scenes because
Sorry, we actually screen for that during the interviewing process. So we actually look for designers. We let them know that that we're a collaborative firm, that we don't believe in this work is my baby and I'm going to be the only one that touches it. We believe that through critique and group work and collaboration, the end product only gets better. And so we've had some people that, we screen for it as best we can. And we've had some people that come in with like, PTSD from their past jobs, things like that, where that's what I call it anyways, PTSD from their
yeah,
past jobs. Some misuse probably, but we need to guide them through the process several times. And I've loved with the people that were more resistant, where I can remember where we were standing and what we were going over when that aha moment happened, when they were like, okay, I didn't want to do this. It's so much better. So much better. And then
yeah.
you start to see them warm up to the collaborative process. But yeah, in our industry, it's pretty rough. There are some people that really just want to own their baby, like you described.
Yeah. And it has its good things and its bad things because they are very passionate about what they do, right? They are very vested in the project and the process, which is what you want. You want a lot of passion, but without some guidance, then that can happen. So kind of going back to what you were telling us a little bit earlier, showing the client the behind the scenes and all the work that you're doing and the energy and the time you're investing and the development that you're doing. It's I remember when I first was working with agencies where, they would just pop up with a project, right? Like, here's what we think we should be doing.
Yeah.
And without understanding all they had gone through, it's like, well, I don't like that idea, but here I have one idea myself, right? But once they actually explain the whole creative process and the steps and the work and the conversations, you kind of gain appreciation for it. So I believe that this happens in your industry, and there's many industries out there that if the
Yeah.
client can see what's happening behind the scenes in the work that's being done, I think it'll have more appreciation. I'll repeat this. It's about getting everybody engaged and invested in the project. And I like that you said, I bring in all the management team. It's not the marketing person's responsibility. It's going to be the company's whole identity. So everybody has to be part of that and online with that, right? And I really like the most important value of all, which is, to me, like listening and respect. You've got to be listening. And sometimes we are very knowledgeable in what we're doing, and we know what we think is the right answer, and we're trying to drive it, and we've put in all this energy, this effort, this work, we have experience, and we're trying to present it to the client. But if we're not listening, we're going to miss something really important. So great fundamentals, whether you're an advertising agency or any other one for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of how you do the start of your relationship. Now let's talk a little bit about when it actually comes to like deliverables, because that is where it can also get really scary because somebody missed something, as you said, doesn't show up like what they expected. Somebody in the team says, well, I think it should be red instead of green. And and you're looking at them and you're like, why? What? And then from then the actual execution of marketing activities. How do you continue to keep those clients engaged, involved, and how do you get them to allow you to do your job?
Well, sure. It's interesting because every client comes in with a different mindset. Again, individualization, right? Some are more receptive to, you're the experts, we don't have any experience in this. Some come in very trusting and very receptive from the get-go. Some come in having had bad prior experiences, frustrating experiences where they've spent a lot of money, they haven't gotten the results they've expected, they had a bad relationship, and those, and also, we tend to work with very, very large small businesses. That's kind of our core client base. And so they're very established, very successful small business owners. And we are usually dealing directly with the owner or a high level, a CMO or a marketing director. And they're real smart. I mean, these people are as passionate as it gets, completely invested, incredibly brilliant. And, so it has forced us at every turn to up our game. There's nobody that's blowing off their job and just getting some ads produced. Like this is the most passionate crowd you could probably work with. And I think that one of the things that we've really learned is in working with them, they don't just help you up your game, but I'm kind of rambling a little bit. Sorry. I totally lost my train of thought. You'll hopefully be able
Okay.
to edit this. Okay.
Well, don't worry. So let's go back to the question, right?
Delivery. Yeah, you asked about, so like
Yeah. So the day to day, you're saying you're
okay.
working with really smart people that really know their stuff,
Yes.
and then you've got to be in your game, but it's like, you're kind of building a relationship with them, and you're moving forward with them.
Thank you.
Let me
Yeah.
know when you're ready, and I'll
Like,
go like
and,
this.
some people are very trusting, but some people don't have that same level of trust. And so it's interesting for these people that have had, negative prior relationships or just not gotten the results, even if it wasn't a horrible relationship, they didn't get the results they were expecting. So those are the ones that we have to win over, right? And we have to, with all of them, you have to deliver results. They have to be impressed with what they see. But I love seeing the point where these clients that are holding everything very close to their chest, that are very, I'm not going to use the word controlling. That would be like the negative interpretation of it. It's my gut reaction, but it's more of they're very concerned. They're very involved because they're very concerned, and they feel that they need to be very involved in every stage of the process. And as the relationship grows and evolves, I just love to see, where they start to say, well, what do you think? Or, whatever you guys choose, or go ahead and handle it, and it doesn't happen immediately with, that type of client. It's a process, and it's because we're building trust. It's because we respect them. It's because we've taken the time to not be frustrated by whatever their prior experiences were. We try to be understanding. We try to undo whatever damage may have been done in a prior relationship by educating and being respectful. And I think that over time, you can start to see that lightening, and they feel like, okay, this is great. We have a real partner. Part of that is probably just that the way we operate is a little different too. We're not a traditional ad agency. We're more of a fractional CMO business, where we really try to provide leadership and strategy as if we were an in-house team member. That's the philosophy that I impart to my team and to our fractional CMOs, is that you don't want to represent us as the agency. You want to represent the business and do what's right for them at every turn. If that means that we talk them out of something that they're asking for, right? If that means that, they come in asking for one thing and we say, I understand why you're asking for that, but let's go through this educational process, talk about, here's what we think you might actually need. I would always rather do what's right and lose the sale, because it's about the relationship. It's not about the instant, monetary reward that month. And so we develop this trust, and we develop they truly know and believe wholeheartedly, because they feel it and they see it in all of our actions, that we are doing what's right for them and that we're looking out for them. So I think that that's something very important that we ingrain. You have to do it at the sales level, at the account management level, the production level. Everybody in the company has to know that that's how it's one of our values and how we're going to operate.
I love that. Again, I'm so well aligned with that philosophy. I try to do that myself, right? And I find that that's where I have the most success, where they don't see me as an outside vendor. They see me as a team member. I'm sitting there with them. I play a couple different roles, and for some clients, a little bit more of this role, for others, a little bit more of that role. But I play a role, and then we have that relationship. And I love that you're saying that your best relationships are where they see you guys as you're playing the role, the function of marketing, and that you're going to do the best for the team. You're going to do the best for the company, period.
Absolutely.
And it's not about trying to upsell. It's not about trying to add services. It's not trying to do more. It's about really being strategic about what the business needs and evolving on that, right? So
Yeah.
you won't show up and say, hey, we need to completely change this or completely change that if that's not necessary. You're going to
Right.
figure out, hey, I own this job. How can I get the best results? How do I prioritize and what do I need to get to work on first? And that goes a long way in building the trust to where people, can then really see you as a partner and then really start to share and communicate, which is not necessarily easy either. I mean, yes, there's some people that are super trustworthy from the get-go, but a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
And trust typically takes time to build.
Right.
So
It's a
having the
single.
mindset of we've got to work through the process to build that trust and then eventually getting there. And then that's where I believe that results just really skyrocket, right? Because then you really have the communication, the information that you need. It's so absolutely, absolutely love it. So, not pitching your company here, but if you need a really good marketing partner, you need to check them out, right? I mean, everything you're hearing here is exactly what you should be doing for your business, probably, but also you probably need some marketing help and support. And I really like that you said, look, it's not like you work with companies that don't have marketing people. It's probably like your best clients are probably the ones that have marketing people and really smart marketing people, because then you can build synergies with them and do some of the stuff that they probably shouldn't be doing. And then if they're more focused on the stuff that they should be doing, then they let you guys handle some of that, then everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to be, we're providing that C-level leadership as the fractional CMO or chief marketing officer for those people that aren't familiar with that phrase. So we're providing guidance, in small doses at that leadership level. And then if they need the rest of our team to help with production, or the things that agencies typically do, we're happy to do that. We're also happy to train and engage with their internal team, or if they have other external vendors that they already work with, we play nice with others. So we definitely are not there to just try to get the biggest piece of the pie. We're definitely there to help them see success in their business, because if they do, we all win. We get more referrals that way, and our business is very largely based on referrals from other happy clients. So all of that is really important.
That is good to hear, right? Really comforting to know that that's how you get your clients and you provide really great relationships and results. Again, 25 years of doing this, you learn a thing or two, right?
Just a few, yeah.
So let's talk about now. I'm kind of going hard back to leadership, and I know that you're big on tools, on systems, on processes. I remember one of our first conversations. I think we were like in an EO meeting or something, and I think it was like a KPI conversation. And you're like, oh yeah, I have these KPIs and I have this and I measure that, and I'm like, wow, okay, all right, you really got your stuff together, really understanding inputs and outputs and yields and learning how to get better. So in any case, I know you have a lot of different tools. You use a lot of different technologies. If you're out there, what is a tool that you think most businesses don't use or have that they really need to start using, right? Whether it's something like personality, something that I know you're super big on culture and making it come to life, which is one of my favorite subjects, because I always like to say one thing is to sit down and write down a few values, and another thing is to make them come to life. And there are completely different things. And I know you work really hard on that front, but it could be anything else. Like, what are one or two of your like go-tos that you want to share with our audience today?
Sure. Well, I already mentioned EOS. I think it's really critical to have some kind of business planning system, and there are lots of different ones. You need to find what works for you. We did the scaling up method, or Rockefeller habits. We used that one-page business plan and that kind of methodology very early on in the business, and I learned about that from my mentors and some of the business workshops I was in. So I had already been accustomed to setting annual goals and quarterly goals and checking in on them weekly. So I think having that cadence is critical no matter what stage of business that you're in. You can't create predictable results unless you have an underlying predictable system to review and measure those goals. And so then within that structure, once you put that structure in, I mean, for some startups and for some small businesses, I'm amazed they just don't have a regular meeting cadence, and they don't have healthy meetings, and they aren't looking at maybe the right information on a regular basis. And so I think that having that structure is just fundamental. Within that structure, you have to have healthy, transparent, to me, transparency and collaboration and, ownership are all really, really important. So you need to have team members who show up to those meetings prepared, engaged, transparent, full of trust and collaboration, and willing to really work. So I've heard all these stories, and I'm just glad that our team, I guess, is doing better. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a great book. We took the assessment and we were like, we don't need to work on this. We're good. I felt really good about our team.
And then you start working, and then you realize you don't have the level of trust that you need, right? Which is at the very base.
Well, we did really well on that assessment, and we were like, we don't need to spend time on this. We have other areas we need to focus, right? Plenty of areas we need to do work, but we have a team that jives, that gets together really well. So I think, having the right people on the bus is important. Right now we're using EOS, and I used the software system that came with scaling up and tried to use their dashboards and their meeting flow. And I found it so cumbersome. And I don't know, it was a long time ago. They may have improved it, but I found it so cumbersome that it actually made the meetings worse. So I stopped using it, and I even stopped having meetings for a while because I was so frustrated at how bad the meetings were and what a waste of time they were. And then when we discovered EOS, I love their agenda that they have for the meetings. And I really recommend trying to follow this agenda. For some people, they do some of the planning parts of EOS, but then they don't adopt this meeting cadence and schedule, and the specific agenda within the meeting is amazing. I think, you start by just having a segue. Everybody checks in with everybody. Where are you? And you can do the what's your personal best and your business best, but that's really glamorizing and maybe even glossing over where people really are. I like to check in with where are you really? If it's crap, tell me it's crap. At least we know how everybody's coming to the table, because we're humans and some people are going to have bad days. It's okay to say that out loud. So I like to have a real check-in. And then, EOS has you look at a scorecard, so KPI, and those are not easy. It takes a while, putting top level financial goals in there and breaking it down by week. That's easy, but hitting it is harder. And so figuring out what those leading indicators are and what the activities are to get those results is the harder part. And that's where the tricky work comes in. So I think having a weekly dashboard that you look at that has, leading and trailing indicators is really critical. Took us probably several years of evolution to get, and it's still evolving. As the business evolves, the KPIs and what we're measuring and looking at are going to have to evolve as well. But then, the meeting also has this identify, discuss, and solve segment. You identify your top issues and you just dump them all into a list, and you read through them and you give everybody a chance to put their issues on the list. And then you all agree on the top 3. So we're not going to talk about all this stuff. We're going to agree, what are the 3 most critical things? And not just because it's bugging me today, but it's actually critical to hitting our goals, right? And so when the whole room is agreeing on it and your goal is to discuss it and solve it, it's never supposed to show back up on that list. So, these companies that have these habits of talking about the same crap over and over again, week after week, month after month, and never really solving it, the EOS system helps you think beyond that. I think that was a huge game changer for us, is we're not going to talk about this over and over again. We're going to solve it right here, right now. And I love that about the EOS agenda. And then we use a software tool that was the original one that came with EOS. It's called Bloom. I know EOS has their own, but I don't think we're going to switch over to that. We're using whatever the Bloom software is, and it's amazing. I think it works really well. We've completely adopted it, all of the different aspects, and feel like it helps keep those meetings on track and store all the information that we need. So I think that's important.
I love it. So, there you go. I asked for something specific. There you go. Super specific, right?
Specific, maybe too specific.
Well, I appreciate it, right? I mean, you're very passionate about it. It has worked really well for you. It's a framework, it's a system, it's a process. I think everybody here knows I'm a business coach, and I've used scaling up, and I use parts of EOS. I use parts of other frameworks, and it is critical to use a framework. It gives you what you were talking about at the beginning, right? Clarity, focus. Everybody gets on the same page. Everybody's having the same conversation, the same language. Everybody's moving forward. What I will say is that one of the reasons why I am not with any of those organizations is that what I've realized is that every business is different, every business owner is different, and every business is at a different stage. So instead of trying to stick to a recipe, you need to be able to take parts and pieces of each to fit the company at the right time. So some companies might need to work on strategy day one, which is probably not the case for most, right? So if you're going into strategy and they really, have some big issues and there's no trust in the organization, you really need to focus in on that first, right? Hey, forget about KPIs right now. We don't trust each other. So being able to recognize where they are in providing the right tools at the right time is critical, all within the context of a framework to give it some structure and direction. So it's not like loosey-goosey, but it is like, where are you right now? What do you need right now? And then use this. So love EOS because it is really a good framework that solves most of the problems. The challenge in the implementation is if you're trying to work on something that's not the right thing for you at the right time, it generates a lot of tension and stress, just like any other system. So the facilitator is critical in helping you navigate through, right? Where do you go, right? What do you focus on? So,
well, and I think it's so funny that you mentioned this because the word loosey-goosey is definitely something I would use to describe me. So while we have this framework, there are times where I'll show up and just say, we're not going to be doing this today. we have something else that we need to focus on that's way more important. So yeah, I definitely used it. We adopted it. We got deep into it, but I completely agree with you that you can get stuck in the system and you can try to let that system drive you, but it can't do the work for you, and it can't help you understand the place that you're at or what you need at that point in time. And I think everybody needs to know that you have permission to go off the reservation or to edit the agendas or to change what you're working on at any point in time, because you need this is where, like, I'm willing to change everything every day, right? Like, to me, having a system keeps me from changing all the things all the time, and it keeps most of the things happening at a regular click, but I'm still very flexible within it. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I completely agree. You need what you need to do at any given time and not believe it as like doctrine, because let's face it, they're all trying to sell something. They have lots of books they want to sell. They have software they want to sell. Like, it's a branded program that they're selling.
Yeah. And no system is ever complete, right? So you gotta be aware of that, right? So you can't say, okay, if I just go to this book, this system, it solves everything. Heck, all those systems are built by a bunch of different thought leaders in their work. So any system that you look at has a bunch of thought leaders behind it, a bunch of different books, a bunch of different research. So in a way, it's like, yes, use it as a foundation, but explore a little bit more and make sure that you can complement it with different areas that you might need at the right place at the right time. Okay, so that's that.
Sorry. I'm a researcher, so I like what you're saying, because we approach our client projects the same way, but I also approach big changes in our business that way. It's also how I cook at home. So maybe that's a good analogy. If I'm going to make cheesecake, I don't know, I'm going to go look at 6 different recipes. I'm going to find the commonalities, just like the core pieces that have to be there. And then I'm going to look at what the interesting differences are. I don't know. I've never pulled one recipe off the internet and just cooked. Same thing with business. So I looked at lots of different planning systems. I've used several different ones, and I'm definitely picking and pulling the pieces that I like from each of them. So I definitely think that it's important to know that no one of these things is perfect or necessarily the right fit for you. And the more you educate yourself and look at what those options are, I think the more the likelihood that you'll be able to find the pieces that are right for you and your business.
Yep. And then when you've done it long enough, you realize that they all have eggs, flour, water, a pinch of salt, right?
Yep.
And then from there you can go a little bit off script. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. I want to talk a little bit about the culture side of things because I think it's one of the things that most businesses get wrong. So the ones that understand the importance of it still don't do it well. And I know you're very vested in it and you're doing it better than most. So how do you make a culture come to life?
So you've got to figure out what those core values are. And there's lots of different activities that you can look at online. There's lots of books that have core values activities. Like I forget which one it is, but taking your model employees and figuring out what it is that makes them, so great as an employee, and then trying to document those values. So anyway, there's activities to do to figure out what the core values should be, making sure that they're authentic and that at least your leadership team and that everyone buys into them. But then they should be used in the hiring process as you're screening employees to make sure that they live up to it. They should be used in the review process to say like, hey, how well does this employee actually embody this core value of transparency, of ownership, of passion. I think that it's also important you can't just do it at those points in time. It can't just be at the hiring and at the reviews. And so a couple of different ways that we keep it alive within the business, we do quarterly staff retreats as prescribed by EOS, and every staff retreat, we go over the core values, and every quarter there's a contest, but we break it down even more. Every single week on Monday mornings, we start the week out by asking the team to give shout outs to their team members for things that happened in the prior week. And we ask them to attach a core value to it. And we actually use a system. When we went remote for a while during COVID, we started using Slack for a lot of internal communications. And we found this software tool called Nectar, which is kind of an employee rewards and management system. And so we linked Nectar up to Slack for anybody that really wants to dive into this. These are cool tools. The shout out channel links. And so you tell Nectar what your core values are, and your employees can go in and give shout outs that will show up in the Slack channel. You can do it either, from either tool, you can put them in there. It gives them points. They can then get rewards. And then it helps you watch the frequency that the different core values are used. How often are we using the core value ownership or passion? Do we need to do more education on what ownership really means, or what transparency really means? Nobody's really using it, or it seems like they're using it wrong. And so it actually has analytics on the core values, and we do kind of a quarterly push for whatever we think is needed. And we do a reward at the end of the quarter for whoever has given the most shout outs using the hashtag and whoever has received the most shout outs using the hashtag. And that happens every Monday morning. And every Monday, our team also gets, I wish I had one to show you, these awesome corns. I don't have one behind me on the wall, but
I've seen them.
These little
I've seen them at your office.
Unicorns that are like a trading card thing, these little 3D sculptures. And so they're super fun. The team loves them. Whoever wins that week, the team votes on whoever most embodies our core values, and then they get an awesome corn. They're unicorns. We call them awesome corns. And so you walk through our office and you see on tops of desks like rows of little unicorns that employees have gotten as shout outs from other team members. And it's just this really positive, fun, friendly, continual visual reminder also of our core values, and of living the core values and recognizing the core values in others. And it really keeps it alive in a way on a weekly basis. It's always there.
Love it. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm going to go over this. Well, I'm about to get to the summary, so I'm going to skip going over this right now. But talk about being very specific about how you do it and about how you make it come to life. Really appreciate that. We're definitely going to make that into a clip so people can see how you're actually executing. I want to ask you one more question because I really think it's important. So it has to do with leadership and actually leadership in marketing. And we see that most businesses don't have a good or a marketing plan to begin with, right? They do stuff. They think that, if you are in Google Ads, then you have a marketing plan or a marketing campaign. And it's weak at best. and most just do stuff. And you would think that only small businesses do this, but mid-market companies do it as well. Their marketing is weak. What are your thoughts on that? How do we help? How do you help? How do we get people to really develop really good, solid marketing plans and then be able to execute them to get the outcomes that they want?
Absolutely. So I think that this is one of the most important evolutions in my role in our business is I've stopped talking about marketing in general, and I've started talking to leaders about how to lead their marketing. So one of the tools that I've developed, it's just a really simple paper survey, and I'm happy to share it with you, and you can share it with your audience to download. It's the CEO's marketing assessment. And it helps a CEO quickly benchmark and understand through all these critical areas in marketing. As a CEO, it's not your job to put a marketing plan together. You probably don't have a marketing education. Some do, but like the vast majority of CEOs don't have a marketing education. They don't have marketing experience as like a marketing director running a full-scale program. Many of the people operating within a small business, actually one of the most interesting statistics is that for businesses between $5 million and $50 million in the United States, less than 12% of them have a CMO, a marketing director, or any type of marketing leadership. What is the CEO's education and experience level? What is the education and experience level of the person who's expected to lead their marketing? Is there even an understanding of how critical marketing is for the growth and success of the business, right? So the CEO's marketing assessment helps the CEO understand their own knowledge level in marketing just quickly. It's just a super quick survey, helps them understand, what their team makeup is. Do they have the skills that are needed? Do they have a plan? Or are they just kind of doing stuff, like you said? So what kind of planning is in place? What kind of tools and resources do you have? So it's a real quick way to benchmark, and I think it's very enlightening for a lot of CEOs to step back, and it also gives them permission to understand that they shouldn't be expected to do all of this, right? To lead as a CEO, you need to know what the recipe is, you need to know what the components are that you need, and you need to start putting the people and the processes and the structure in place. And so that's why I developed that tool. And we also have a marketing plan fundamentals workshop that kind of goes hand in hand with it. And it's not to teach DIY marketing. The last thing I want is a CEO to be doing their own marketing. It's meant to teach a CEO what they need to lead other people to put in place. So it kind of walks through what those core components are. It's education, and then it'll help them identify the resources, whether they're going to hire someone in-house, whether they're going to find fractional help, whether they're going to outsource it all. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish what a business needs to. I don't have any one anything. If you haven't caught on to that already, there's a lot of variability, so many options. So it really helps them think through where they need to be and what's going to work for their company. But I completely agree. Most businesses are missing this marketing component. It's in the data. I've used Hoovers and I've used Sales Navigator to kind of do that analysis to see what the level of marketing leadership is in these companies. And it's just shocking that there's this void of experienced marketing leadership in that size of company.
It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I will definitely post those resources. The big idea here is this, right? If you're the CEO, if you're the leader of the organization, it's not about you becoming a marketing expert. It's about you recognizing how to make sure you have the marketing expertise that you need in your business.
Yes.
And I love that you're saying, hey, let me give this resource because we want to help people do better marketing. And of course, if they need your help, then they're going to know how to connect with you and how to get it. And I appreciate that because most of the messaging out there is, I'm going to teach you how to do marketing. I'm going to teach you how to get new clients. And you're like, no.
It's
We're
wrong.
going to help the marketing person. We're going to help the marketing person do that. And I think it's like a big sigh of relief to know it's like, oh, I don't have to do this. Nope. You just have to get the right people, the right tools, the right support. So it should be a huge relief to a bunch of you out there to hear this, that it's not about
you.
It's
about
on
TikTok. Yeah. Like, you don't have to become a TikTok expert. Please, no, don't do it.
Or a TikToker. You don't have to be a TikToker either. No. Okay. So let me do a summary of some of the things that we've talked about. After I do the summary, if I've missed anything, Lara, please fill it in. And if there's something else that you wanted to talk about, but we haven't gotten to, you'll have a chance. So Here I go. So I think it all started with you just jumping in and launching Robot Creative when you were very young, and your leadership style at the time was just getting things done, right? And move things forward. It evolved to understand the importance of emotional intelligence. And you've mentioned this phrase a few times, right? Which is individualization. I don't know if I said it correct.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that you need to adapt to the different individuals and to get the most out of each one of them and to play to their strengths and to allow each one to flourish in their own area. And it all started with you knowing more about yourself and giving yourself permission to be great at what you're great at. And, that happens to be change and evolution and learning and understanding. And you also realized that the organization needed more stability, clarity, expectations, alignment, and that there needed to be a certain tension between your speed and the speed at which the organization can move. So then 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 we talk. Well, let me kind of continue on that. Know yourself and know your people, and the importance of knowing yourself and knowing your people. I can lower my hand now. Emoji showed up there. Okay, so managing yourself to better fit what the team needs and to be able to provide them what they need. And well, we talked a little bit about building momentum, right? In startups, you get a lot of momentum. Investors want to see these peaks, these waves of growth, but you need the drivers that push that, but you also need your systemizers and communicators and the people that are like managing the business, not just the products and the development of that. And without having those two things, then you might not have the happy investors that you need. So we talked to then a little bit about leading clients and what you try to do and how and what you do. And this is where we really got to see a little bit of kind of how you view the world and how you operate. And you said, hey, look, it has to be a fun, collaborative, and enjoyable experience for all, right? It's like, you got me there. I'm done. How do I hire you? And then showing behind the scenes, letting people know and see and become engaged and invested in your process and how you do things. So sharing the research, sharing the project, sharing the ideation. You said, hey, we even share sketches, which was like one of the first things I learned not to do. It's like, don't show people, like uncompleted work, because they're going to react to that. You always have to show them the finished product. You're like, no, 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 no. Let's show them the progress, because then they'll see how you're thinking and how you're evolving things, right? And show them the progress and recognize and explain and teach throughout the way. Respect and listening. Really like that, because you have high levels of expertise, but yet you still need to listen to the client and make sure that they are comfortable and confident in any way. So you teach your team to how to do that. And I really like that you said you got to have the whole team engaged, not just your team, but the client's team engaged. And it's through that engagement that you're gonna get to build the next big thing, which is trust. They need to see you as a team member and not just a vendor to them, right? And it's when you build this trust that the relationship really goes to the next level, where they can actually say, hey, what do you think? And you're like, well, now that you ask, right? And kind of share the brilliance and have things moving forward and flowing a lot better. So everyone in your team recognizes the importance of that relationship. Everybody in the team recognizes the importance of collaboration, and there's individualizations, but not individuality. And I think that's important, because you're trying to adapt to everybody, but at the same time, nobody owns the project. It's nobody's baby, in the sense that everybody gets to collaborate and contribute to the collective brain. Then we went into like, hey, what are some tools? And you said EOS, the EOS operating systems, has been critical for you, trying different ones. You said, hey, this is the one that really works for me, gives me the structure, gives me the discipline, and it allows me to kind of be creative, but stay within the context of being able to continue to drive the organization. And we also talked about the importance of, hey, go off the reservation. Recognize that you need to go off script times. You need to get other tools, other books, other systems, other processes, and you get to kind of stop and say, hey, wait. I'm gonna use my words, not yours. But you said, like, this is BS. Let's talk about what's really going on here, right? And not just kind of playing it at the surface level. Culture, such an important conversation. Not everybody knows the importance of culture yet, but a lot of people do, but it's not working for them well. So you gave us some really good insight on how you make it work for you. So you were mentioning like the Mission to Mars exercise in Jim Collins' book as a way of starting to discover some of these exercises. I think you have to be listening a lot to what people are saying, because you will find these values in frustrations. When people are frustrated, that's when you're going to recognize that there's an expectation that's not being met, and that's where you can pinpoint that, hey, there's a value there. But in any case, you said, hey, look, you got to hire employees based on these values. You got to review team members on these values. So it's not just about your KPIs or metrics, but are you living up to them, and are we seeing the behaviors on them? You talk about them, right? You talk about them in meetings. And I really like the idea of going over them. That's one thing. But then actually recognizing people and telling the stories of people that exemplified those behaviors. So they're always front and centered. They're always being discussed, and you're recognizing people. And then you took it to the next level by actually opening up and telling us exactly how you use it. So you say, hey, look, there's a great software called Nectar. You connect that to your Slack. You gamify culture, and you're looking for observing and enabling people to share when they visualize those behaviors, when they hear those behaviors. And kind of connecting these tools allows everyone to be more aware of them and have something in it for recognizing others and for recognizing themselves. And then you also make it physical, right? So it doesn't just stay in the digital worlds. You actually have these unicorns that you give people out, so everybody recognizes who's living up to those behaviors. And I'm sure there's like competition to see who has more of these, right? And people feel proud of having them and displaying them and showing them and telling the stories about them. So lots of great, very specific advice on how to do it. Then we talked a little bit about the crazy need for marketing education. And the big idea there is that if you're the CEO or the leader of the organization, you don't have to become the marketing genius, but you need someone that is. And you really need to be able to create a good plan and have it executed by the right people, whether it's in-house, whether you're training people, whether you're hiring someone externally, but you need to have it. And you're very kind to share with us the CEO's marketing assessment, so people can recognize where they are, and then they can even take it a step further, and then taking a workshop on marketing plan fundamentals, which is like, okay, great. Now you can have a plan. Now it can be executed. You really see the outcomes instead of just doing stuff. So I'm sure I missed a thing or two. What did I miss, or what have I not
really
asked you that we need to talk about?
I don't know how you captured all of that as well as you did. It's actually really impressive. It's well done.
Listening, the value of listening, right?
I think that's a fantastic. Right, there you go.
Well,
and great note taking. You must have shorthand skills or something.
messy notes with lines and stuff.
Yeah, well, you did great. I think that's an incredible summary.
Thank you. So what did I miss? What have I not asked you about that you believe, people here should know about?
That's a tricky question. I think we've covered probably, I mean, I could probably tell 1,000 stories. I could stay on with you for another hour and we could dig deeper into a couple of different things. We touched on personality tests. We didn't get that much deeper into it. I think that Myers-Briggs, they've actually debunked that and said that these tests don't work. I've read some things that, kind of indicate that those may not be scientifically accurate. However, I have to say, in my experience, that by taking those tests and then as a team talking about it, so we've done facilitated workshops with, I do like bringing in facilitators who are trained at, very, very specific types of coaching or leadership skills to conduct programs for our team. And I have really found that the conversations that come out of our team members understanding one another are just so important. I love, whether the test is scientifically accurate or not, the conversations that come out of it help our teams get to know themselves and one another better and on a more personal level. I mean, just one example is we have somebody that is very detail oriented that asks like 1,000 questions, like no I is ever undotted, no T is ever uncrossed, and no question ever goes unasked. And sometimes it's a lot. It can make a meeting take longer. It can make an email really long and hard to read. And so we love her. Like, I love this about her, but we as a team, we're all identifying our different personality traits. And so, the team got to talk about like, hey, this is one of Chris's like superpowers. It's what makes her awesome, right? And how do we channel that? When do we use it? When does Chris maybe need to edit and, limit it and use fewer words? And that's just one of so many examples that come out. We have some people that are very, very process oriented and very regimented, and some people that are, amazing connecting with people. And we've all of these different things, my loosey goosiness, like all of these things have come out through doing different activities, working with one another and talking about it very openly. So this leads to that, like that transparency and that collaboration of everybody really getting to know one another and what makes them tick at it's very personal in a lot of ways, right? Like, we don't always dig into like, well, why are you that way? Where did that come from? Like, we don't necessarily need the backstory, but to know that, to respect it among each other.
Let me ask you this. So if you've never used any of these tools, which one would you start with, right? Which one would you recommend somebody start with?
I think I like DISC a little bit better than Strength Finder. I think that what DISC does is helps you understand how you communicate with one another, how you process information, and how you communicate and how people prefer to be communicated with. I think it feels real accurate to me. Again, I haven't done the scientific research on it, but I think we always tell people when they take the assessment to read through it and to highlight anything that they completely agree with, to maybe put a question mark if they don't necessarily agree, like, hey, I don't really think this is me. But it's kind of amazing how most people look at it and think, yeah, that's me. And then DISC gives really concrete guidance on, like, if you're a D, here's how you communicate with a C. D's move really fast and don't want a lot of detail, and then here we have a C who's incredibly analytical and they want all the details and they want all of the data and they need to go slower and they're going to need to think about it. And so obviously there could be some pretty significant conflict between those two in particular. And, they match up all of the different, letters and all the different personality types and give really concrete tips on how you present information, how you talk to one another. And I think it leads to more respect. Instead of being irritated by somebody, thinking of it as like a behavior, you look at it more as like a trait. Everybody's traits are a double-edged sword, but like, this is that person's superpower. There's probably a downside to it, but there's a reason this person is this way, and there's a reason that they're valuable to the team. So let's find the best possible way to work with them and to respect that instead of judging or being frustrated by it.
I appreciate it. I'm 100% with you. I think DISC is definitely the place to start, and it's the most practical of the tools. And then as you evolve, you might want to do culture index or predictive index. It goes a little bit more into the depth of the makeup of your team and kind of what you need to continue to build a team that's well-rounded. But excellent. Appreciate that. Lara, so before I let you go today, 2 questions. How can people find you? How can they know more about you, your company? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. So robotcreative.com is our website. And I'm also very engaged on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I'm easy to find under Lara August. It's just LinkedIn/Lara August. So please feel free to connect with me there and reach out. Let me know that you saw the podcast. And I think I'd love to hear from your audience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So before I let you go today, what's something good, fun, happy that's happening here in the next few weeks or months for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, we've talked a lot about planning. We're having our staff retreat on Tuesday, and I'm super excited because we had such a high growth year. We have lots of promotions that are happening. We have a whole wave of really dedicated staff members that are moving into kind of managerial leadership positions. And I just can't wait to go over, all of the plans that we have for our next level of growth over the next year. It's a really exciting time. So I look forward to that every time.
Well, I appreciate that, right? It's about at the end of the day, it's about people, and it's fun to help and to see people grow and evolve, and you get the opportunity, as you said, right? You started with, there's a lot of promotions. So that's excellent. Yes. Lara, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Really appreciate it. A really great insight and information and very specific specific things that our audience can go and do. So everybody will thank you for that. So thanks again, and I look forward to talking again in the future.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.